Part 1. The woman who challenged the ice. They called her Aunt Sala, not because she was anyone's real aunt, but because in a village this small, every elder became family, the kind you respected, even feared a little. She had lines on her face that looked carved by the wind itself, and eyes that had seen more winters than anyone wanted to count. At 68, she still carried herself like the young hunters, back straight, hands steady, gaze sharp. It was early March in the coldest inhabited place on earth. The thermometer nailed to the side of her cabin read -71 that morning, though it hardly mattered. At that temperature, cold wasn't something you felt, it was something you wore, like a heavy second skin. The air froze the inside of your nose the moment you stepped outside. Leather cracked, wood groaned. Even the sled dogs didn't bark. They just curled tighter, tails over noses, waiting for the day to decide if it was worth moving at all. But the village needed meat. The young men had gone out twice that week and returned with nothing but frostbitten cheeks and shame in their eyes. The seals had moved farther out onto the frozen river, beyond the safe ice. No one wanted to risk going there. Too many hidden cracks, too many stories of people swallowed whole by the river, without a sound. No one, except Sala. Inside her small cabin, she worked in silence. Fur hood, sealskin mittens, boots lined with reindeer hide. She tied the final knot on the sled's rope harness, her hands moving without hesitation. The dogs, 7 in all, stood ready, sensing the purpose in her movements. They knew her voice better than any whistle. She didn't need to shout. A single click of her tongue could send them into a gallop. She didn't tell anyone she was going, not because she wanted secrecy, but because she knew what would happen if she did. Hands on her arms, voices begging her not to go. People saw her as too old for dangerous hunts. She saw herself as the last one stubborn enough to try. The sled creaked forward, runners scraping across the hard snow before gliding over the polished surface of the frozen river. The wind here didn't just blow, it sliced. It found every gap in your clothing, every seam, and slid its icy fingers against your skin. But Sala leaned into it, eyes locked on the far bend where the wind stripped the snow from the ice, leaving it bare and blue. That was where she'd find them. Every step of the dogs echoed in the vast silence. Out here, even the smallest sound carried the faint whine of sled runners, the soft huff of canine breath, the deep, occasional crack from somewhere beneath the ice. That sound alone could turn a hunter's blood cold. It meant the river was moving, alive, and that one wrong step could end the journey instantly. Sala slowed the sled near a cluster of wine-scoured patches. She stepped off, crouching low, scanning the ice. Then she heard it, a faint sigh, the sound of life beneath the frozen world. She crept closer and saw it, a perfect circle in the ice, its edges ringed with frost from the warm breath below. The seal's air hole. She dropped to her stomach, coat blending into the snow. Hunting a seal was not about speed, it was about patience. You waited, still as stone, until the animal came up to breathe again. It could take minutes, it could take hours. Her father's voice echoed in her mind from a lifetime ago. The seal decides if you eat today. The wind picked up. Her fingers stiffened inside the mittens. Time lost meaning. Then, from the darkness below, it appeared. A glistening head, massive. Black eyes like polished obsidian. This was no ordinary seal. This was a giant. Sala's breath slowed. Her fingers tightened on the harpoon. And in the frozen stillness of the coldest place on earth, she prepared to strike. Part 2, waiting for the breath beneath the iceth. Seal's head broke the surface for barely a second, a slow, steaming exhale before sinking again into the black water. Sala didn't move. Any twitch, any crunch of snow under a knee, and the hunt would be over before it began. The wind roared across the frozen river, but beneath it, she could still hear the faint splash of the seal moving below. She imagined it circling, sensing the air above, deciding if it was safe to come up again. In the Arctic, seals had survived for thousands of years because they were cautious. Hunters had survived just as long because they were patient. Her mittens hid the slight tremor in her fingers. At -71°C, nothing stayed warm for long. Even the harpoon shaft felt like it was trying to glue itself to her skin. She shifted her weight an inch at a time, planting her knees in the snow for better leverage. The air hole was wide enough for a man's head, proof that this animal was enormous. Minutes stretched into something longer. She felt her heart slowing, her breathing shallow. Time didn't pass in hours or minutes here. It passed in heartbeats and exhales. Then it happened. The shadow rose beneath the ice like a ghost. It came slow, deliberate, the way an animal moves when it knows it's king of its world. Sala saw the outline of its massive body. It had to be near one. 500 pounds. This was not just a meal. This was the kind of catch that could feed the whole village for weeks. The seal surfaced again, its whiskers rimmed with frost. Sala's arm tensed. In one motion, she drove the harpoon down, the tip breaking the icy rim and plunging deep. The seal thrashed instantly, a violent surge that sent freezing water spraying over her face. The battle was on. The harpoon line whipped taut, burning against her mittens. She dug her boots into the ice, teeth gritted. The seal lunged beneath the hole, trying to dive deeper, but the barbed tip held. She knew the danger. One slip, one broken knot, and it would be gone. The dogs barked wildly from the sled, sensing the struggle. Their cries mixed with the sharp crack of the ice. Shifting under her weight, she risked a glance. A thin fracture. Line was spidering out from the air hole. The seal lunged again, and this time the pull nearly yanked her flat onto the ice. She planted her knees, leaned back, and used every ounce of strength her 68 years had left. It was a brutal tug of war, human versus muscle and blubber forged for life in sub-zero seas. Sala could feel her strength draining, the cold biting deeper. Her breath came in white bursts, her arms burning, but she remembered the empty racks in the smokehouse, the hollow eyes of the children in the village, and she pulled harder. The ice groaned ominously beneath them. One wrong move and both hunter and prey could vanish into the black water. She shifted her weight, guiding the seal toward the edge of the hole, timing each pull with its frantic lunges. Then, with a final heave, the animal's massive head and shoulders burst through the ice. It thrashed wildly, sending shards of frozen water into the air. Sala moved fast, securing the line around a wooden spike she drove into the ice. The seal's fight slowed, not because it gave up, but because it knew it had been bested. She knelt there, chest heaving, frost clinging to her lashes, watching the great animal's breath turn to steam in the frozen air. Out here, there was no celebration, no cheers, only respect. She had taken life, but it would give life back to her people. The hard part was over, or so she thought. Far to the west, the horizon had darkened to the color of slate. A wall of snow and wind was racing toward her. The hunt was done. Now it was a race against the blizzard. Part 3. The blizzard hunt back home. First gust hit her like a shove from an unseen giant. It rattled her hood, stung her cheeks through layers of fur, and carried with it a voice she knew well, the scream of an Arctic blizzard. She tightened the seal lashings, checking the harpoon line again. The animal lay still now, its great weight spread across the ice. She would have to haul it onto the sled, a task that would test even a young hunter in good weather. At 68, with wind cutting like knives, it felt almost impossible. But impossible wasn't a word that lived here. The dogs paced, whining in the rising storm. Their breath was already frosting into little clouds around their muzzles. Sala planted her boots and began the slow, brutal work of dragging the seal toward the sled. Every pull was like trying to lift a wall. The ice beneath her boots squealed. As it scraped against her heels, the wind rose, and with it came snow, not gentle flakes, but tiny shards, each one sharp enough to sting. Visibility dropped to arm's length. The horizon vanished, replaced by a swirling white void. She worked by memory and instinct now, each movement automatic. Hook the tail, shift the weight, brace the knees, pull again. When the seal finally slid onto the sled, the wood groaned under the weight. She lashed it down with rawhide straps, each knot biting into her mittens. The dogs stood ready, ears flattened, eyes bright with the wild energy of the storm. She gave the command. The sled jerked forward, the dogs lunging into the whiteness. The wind screamed louder now, carrying the sound of cracking ice somewhere behind them. Every instinct told her to keep moving. In a blizzard like this, stopping was as good as lying down in the snow for the last time. Snow built up on her forehead until it sagged. Her eyelashes froze together when she blinked. She leaned into the sled, guiding it along the narrow ice ridges she could still feel under the runners. Somewhere ahead lay the faint trail home, now buried under fresh snow. Minutes felt like hours. The storm swallowed all sound except the wind and the panting of the dogs. Somewhere in that white haze, a shadow loomed, the dark outline of an ice pressure ridge. She steered wide, knowing one wrong turn could shatter the sled or break a dog's leg. Her mind wandered to the stories the elders told, of hunters who'd gone out in fine weather and never returned, their bodies found weeks later under drifts taller than houses. She pushed the thought away and focused on the next breath, the next step. The cold was working its way deeper now, past the layers of fur and hide, past the muscle, into the bones. Her hands felt like stone inside the mittens. Her toes had gone from aching to numb, a sign she knew too well. Numbness was danger disguised as comfort. The dogs slowed, their fur plastered with ice. She could see the faint rise of the land. Ahead, the start of the snow-covered ridge that led down toward the village. Just beyond that ridge was shelter, smoke, and warmth. But the last stretch was always the hardest. The wind hit from the side, nearly tipping the sled. She shouted over the roar, her voice breaking into the storm. The lead dog's ears twitched, and the team straightened, pushing harder. Finally, through the white curtain, a shape emerged, the dim outline of a wooden frame. It was the drying rack outside her smokehouse. Relief washed over her, but she didn't loosen her grip on the sled. Not yet. One more bend, one more push, and they were through the gates of the village. The snow here was waist deep, the wind whipping between the houses. Faces appeared in the doorways, eyes widening at the sight of the sled's burden. She stopped only when the sled was beside her own house. Hands reached out to help, voices breaking through the wind, calling her name. She stepped off the runners, her legs stiff, and looked once more at the great seal, steam still rising faintly from its body. They had made it, but in the Arctic, survival wasn't a story's end. It was just another chapter. Part 4, the feast that the ice demanded be the time the seal was hauled inside the workshed. The storm outside had turned the world into a solid wall of white. The wind rattled the wooden planks, but inside there was only the steady rhythm of knives on hide. Sala's daughter worked beside her, hands steady, eyes sharp. The younger hunters had gathered too, drawn by the sight of such a massive catch. No one in the village had seen a seal this size in years, not even the oldest elders. In the Arctic, a hunt wasn't just about food, it was about respect. For the animal, for the land, for the thin thread of life that tied them all together. Sala worked with that respect in every movement. She cut with precision, keeping the hide intact, folding it carefully to be tanned later. The blubber was thick, a rich store of energy that would keep lamps burning through the long night and bodies warm in the dead of winter. The meat was divided according to old rules older than any written record. The hunters took their share, but so did the widows, the sick, and the families who'd had no luck this season. Every part of the animal had a purpose. The bones would be carved into tools, the sinew would become thread, even the whiskers would be kept, charms, against bad weather, some said. Sala worked in silence, the only sound the scrape of steel and the occasional creak of the building in the wind. She felt the heat in her muscles fading, replaced by a deep, satisfying weariness, the kind that only came after a day when everything, skill, luck, and stubbornness, had been tested. Outside, the dogs slept in a drift, tails curled over their noses. Their work was done for now, but she knew they would remember the storm, the struggle, the scent of the seal. Dogs never forgot a hunt like this. By evening, the storm began to ease. The wind softened to a low moan, and through a break in the clouds, the pale blue of the Arctic twilight returned. Sala stepped outside for a moment, breathing in the cold air, letting it bite her lungs. Across the village, thin trails of smoke rose from chimneys. Somewhere, she could hear laughter, sharp and bright against the snow. The feast would come next. The whole village would gather, sharing stories, drinking hot broth thick with seal fat. Children would beg to hear again how she had stood on the ice, harpoon raised, while the animal lunged from the water. The elders would nod slowly, remembering their own hunts long past. She knew they would call her brave, stubborn, maybe even lucky. But she also knew the truth. Survival here wasn't about any one hunt, any one person. It was about the chain that stretched from past to present, the traditions, the knowledge, the patience to wait on the ice, the strength to haul a sled in the dark. Inside, the fire crackled. A pot of seal stew simmered, filling the room with a smell that spoke of warmth and life. She sat down at last, feeling the stiffness in her shoulders, the ache in her hands. The bowl was hot against her palms, the broth rich and heavy. She took the first sip slowly, letting it warm her from the inside out. Somewhere far away, the sea ice shifted, a deep groan that only those who lived here could hear. A reminder that the Arctic was always moving, always changing, and that no victory lasted forever. But tonight, there was food. Tonight, there was shelter. Tonight, there was the knowledge that when the ice demanded a test, she had answered. And in the coldest place on earth, that was enough.